Good morning. Today we are starting off with week 2 of the new 52 churches in 52 weeks. So my name is David, author from the first one, and today we're going to be visiting Ripon Community Church in Ripon, Wisconsin. This church is near and dear to my heart, just because they came in at a very pivotal moment in my life. So anyway, when it comes to the 52 churches in 52 weeks, with week 2, we're just warming up. Kind of like in weightlifting or exercise, like you're not going to start off with benching 450 pounds on your very first lift or run 26 miles on your first run. Like, I'm starting off just doing some churches that I'm familiar with, that I feel comfortable with, putting my toe in the water just to get things started. After I wrote the first book, I was kind of struggling with a couple different spirituality kind of questions I had. One of them was, okay, I believe God, I believe Jesus died for my sins, I believe He resurrected, but if I believe in Christ, if I'm a Christian, do I also need to believe the first 11 chapters in the Bible? Talking snake, giant flood, Tower of Babel, it just seemed like a bunch of biblical fairy tales the more that I thought about it. And I didn't think that was really doing justice to what the Bible's all about. So I played around with some ideas on that, but I didn't really have the motivation to go much further. And again, the Garden of Eden was just one of the biggest things that I struggled with, trying to understand if it was true or not, because I was of the mindset, how is there a physical garden without sin and talking snakes and all this other kind of stuff? Well, eventually in life, I had someone come across inside my life, and I'm not going to get too much into specifics on it, but I heavily invested in that particular person, and gave up a lot of different things, and eventually I found out and uncovered I don't know how else to say this, a heart full of snakes that I uncovered. And the little Garden of Eden that I had been creating was just camouflaged in deception. And everything that I knew, everything that I thought was just a complete lie. And all it did was it kind of created this slippery spirituality where the more I found out, the more eggs were laid when it came to things like lies, anger, entitlement, rage. And it took me a long time to kind of figure out, okay, I was just the victim of narcissistic abuse. And I'm an empath. Like, I trust people at their word. And that completely just tore apart my own Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, it's, Eve takes the apple, she gets deceived, and she takes a bite out of it. And it was shocking to me where it's like another person could, instead of biting out the apple, they could download gigabytes from an Apple iPhone and fall in the same type of deceptive sin, listening to Satan, listening to the snakes in their head on what was true and what was not. And it took me a while to understand, whoa, wait a minute. Like, forget the Garden of Eden as a physical place. Like, the Garden of Eden, it lives inside all of us. I think there's a Bible passage that's like the kingdom of Christ lives inside all of us. Well, we have a tree of knowledge and good and evil inside of us. And that was really, really eye-opening, because, and with the Garden of Eden, okay, so maybe it's not a physical place, but my gosh, there is so much more universal truth. It's more true than the actuality of a physical place. And that opened up my eyes so much when it came to what was happening in my life at that time. The terrible thing about it all is, so I reached out to my church at that time. I'd been going there for 2 years, and the church was going to be impacted by what was happening. And, you know, I got to know the people. I got to know a little bit about the pastor. It wasn't, you know, one of the regrets I had is I didn't get more involved with that church. But when I reached out, when I called for a call back, when I emailed, I got no response back. I was at the lowest rock bottom in my life, and the church did nothing for me. And as I found out over the past few years, it's very difficult, especially for men, to admit or be vulnerable when things negatively impact your life. And if the church isn't there for you, oh gosh, it's so easy to lose your faith. So I was still trying to look for some type of spiritual home, and that's when I actually had someone, a customer at the time, who suggested RCC, and she advised, hey, you know, come to church, meet Pastor Sam. He'll have lunch with you, the whole full 9 yards. I'm like, okay, well, I got nothing else going on. My church failed me. I feel like a failure myself at that time. What can it hurt? And the first service I went to for RCC, the sermon was kind of funny. It was about the fear of the fear of global calamity, and all these different things, like what would happen if the world, I don't know, was nuked, or some kind of huge famine happened. And I remember leaving the service, I'm like, that sermon did nothing for me. Like, we live in the year at that time, 2019? Like, nothing's going to happen. And then a few months later, coronavirus, and that changed everything. So I was getting heavily involved with that with RCC, and with the coronavirus, with COVID, shut the churches down, and then there was that whole stretch of you have to sign up to go to church for a while, and then there was all kinds of different stuff, and it just was this hot, cold. Are we going to church? Are we not going to church? Everything kind of changed. So with RCC, I'm excited to go back, just because they were kind of like an adoptive church for me when I really needed it. So I'll touch base in a little bit here about what they did for me, and kind of show you some sights and sounds of what this church is like.
said nothing more. Naomi had been encouraging Ruth to go back to Moab to start fresh because it would be easier for her. But Naomi didn't know just how ruthlessly Ruth would want to be with her. First, let me just say one more thing about mother before we go on. As is evidenced by this story, a mother is not a mother because she gave birth. A mother is a mother because she's taken on that role in someone's life. She's loved, she's cared deeply, she's been there. That's a mom, and it is an amazing thing to witness. There's a principle here in this story that if you're not careful, you can just read over it and not even realize that it's there. It's a principle about how to have a rich and meaningful relationship. It's this. Did you catch it? It's at some point, every rich and meaningful relationship must be freely chosen.
So I finished up at RCC not too long ago, and I had to sit down a little while really to digest the service and everything that happened, because it really kind of correlates to what I was saying earlier with where I was going with RCC before COVID hit. When I got in there, I had 3 points of contact, 2 people at the door, 1 person that gave the bulletin. I was seated right at the front, maybe a little too close. And the song selection, they played 3 songs in the beginning, 2 songs at the end. One of the songs, the very first one, was called Brighter Days. It's by I had to do some research who it was, because it was really catchy. And it was I guess a Nigerian artist named Blessing Offer. I don't know if that's right or not. They played another song called Jericho from Andrew Rip. And then This Is Amazing Grace from Phil Wickman. The song at the end of the service, it was a Hillsong one, and then another one from Phil Wickman as well. So not your typical Bethel Hillsong elevation music. A lot of this is more kind of like your K-Love type of music selection. The sermon series, Pastor Sam is doing a sermon series called How to Live Rich. And today is Mother's Day. So the focus was more on how to have rich, meaningful relationships. We all desire it. How do we protect that? How do we cultivate that, especially in today's day and age? And with Mother's Day, it was a really good kind of transition because, hey, the very first person that you develop a relationship in life is with your mother. That's kind of obvious. And he really kind of went into how the entire sermon series was basically based off Naomi and Ruth and their relationship. Obviously, everyone knows kind of the Ruth story, I feel like, from an Old Testament standpoint. He kind of brought up some interesting points that I never really thought about, because as a guy, it's like I'm more King David and Samson and Jesus Christ and the more masculinity when it comes to the Bible. It's very rare that you really kind of get a good type of feminine character that can really be the focus of a sermon series. And with Ruth, it was more kind of focused on Naomi, because he kind of focused with it being Mother's Day. The whole story is Naomi, Ruth, Orpah. They all became widows. All their husbands passed away from a famine, and Naomi's going back home. Naomi's trying to get Orpah and Ruth to go back. Orpah leaves, but Ruth basically becomes the symbol of abiding loyalty and devotion. She doesn't want to leave Naomi, and because Naomi has basically become her mother. One thing that Pastor Sam that I thought really stuck out at me was a mother is not a mother because she gave birth. Like, it's because she's taken on a role. She's taken on a role in someone's life to show that she's cared, that she's loved, that she's got your back. And with Ruth, that meant something. That meant more than, going back to her own biological family. And with Pastor Sam, he kind of pointed out a lot of different things in terms of how we shouldn't be focusing on the relationships that had faded in the past and let that bring us down, but focus more on the relationships that are right in front of us. And, as I go through my own stuff and I go through, the snakes in my past, you can't keep looking back at the past. You got to be looking forward. And I think even as we desire rich, meaningful relationships, like the only way that we're going to get that is with Christ. One of the things I wanted to touch base before I got to the church was, with 52 churches in 52 weeks, it is not a long-term solution for spirituality. You can almost kind of think of it like dating. Like you're trying to find the right church or you're trying to find the right person to date. And a lot of times it doesn't always work out so well. When I got to RCC, I was I was even starting to write a new book based off my time there. It was going to be called One Church in 52 Weeks. And it was difficult because how do you write an entire book about one church for an entire year? So I did not do that. But when I became part of RCC, they kind of basically adopted me when I needed it most. And with Pastor Sam, and this is the thing that I really took away. I had gone to all these different churches with the first 52 churches in 52 weeks. Took away all these different things that I learned. But I never felt like I had a home by the end of it. And that's the weird thing about it. Like I went through all these different churches and by the end of it, I didn't have a church. I just kind of, after that was done, I kind of went back to a few churches a second time or a third time, but I never went any further than that. And that really did not help when it came to my faith. I really needed to plug in somewhere. And with RCC, I was trying to plug in before COVID hit. And by the time everything had opened up again, like my life had already changed. My life had moved on. And it just didn't make any sense. And that's no fault of RCC. That's no fault of mine. It's life. And you want to cultivate that relationship. And what RCC did that I'd never seen before with another church is they were like with Pastor Sam, he was trying to reach out. He was trying to cultivate a relationship with me. And like, I don't know many churches that do that. You have a lot of mega churches. You have a lot of these, or even traditional smaller churches. Like the fact that Pastor Sam, like he went out for a cup of coffee with me, just tried to learn who I was, learn what motivates me, what's my story. Like churches don't disciple like that. And I'm hoping with this 52 churches in 52 weeks, I don't lose sight that I'm trying to do something more with this to show you as a viewer what else is out there. But if you're looking for a church, cultivate it. Cultivate that relationship with your pastor so you can really plug in. And it's kind of like when it comes to dating. Like you're trying to find a relationship. You're trying to find something that has meaning, that you can protect, that has honor. Someone that's got your back and that you can trust, because loyalty, words don't matter so much anymore. It's all about action. And it's very hard to keep those going nowadays. So with RCC, other than that, I always appreciate the times I've been there. And, I wish them the best of luck because it's a fantastic church. And the fact that they disciple the way that they do, it doesn't seem like many churches do that. So that's a wrap on week 2. I'm going to go to another community church for week 3. Week 4 is kind of up in the air, but yeah, we're just warming up and we'll see what happens next. So thanks for watching. Hit the like button and subscribe if you like to keep up to date. If you want to read about the first 52 churches in 52 weeks, check it out on Amazon if you like reading. So thanks for watching and have a good one.